Hello and welcome to the series on grammar videos. This is the first of two preliminary videos. There'll be about 10 videos on very specific topics of grammar. The first two sort of should give you a foundation, an idea of what kind of terms we use, so that the other videos will hopefully make more sense as I'm referring to terms that you may or may not be familiar with. So this first video is titled The Grammatical Components of Sentences. So we're looking at specific parts of the sentences, what they're called and how they function within a sentence. Let's start with the subject of a sentence. So the definition for that is that the subject is the agent of the action. So basically this can be a name, or we'll call it a noun, or a pronoun, or a phrase that controls the verb in the clause or the sentence. So this could be a person doing something, it could be an inanimate object doing something, but it is a person or a thing doing something in a sentence. So the simple example here, John likes music. So in the sentence, John is the subject, he's the agent of the action, in this case the liking of the music. The next part is the predicate. We also call that the verb. So the predicate is a verb or verb phrase that represents the action of which the agent here is always the subject. Again, it represents what the subject is doing. So whatever the action is in a sentence, the verb, the predicate, has to express that. So in this example, Bob is studying. So is studying in the sentence is the predicate. It's the present continuous tense of the verb to study. We're going to talk about conjugations and infinitives in the third person singular. So third person singular is he, she, or it. And again, it expresses the action of which Bob here is the agent. Let's look at the two types of verbs. The first type is what we call transitive verbs. So a transitive verb is a verb that can modify one or more direct objects, and we will also talk about what a direct object is. So in this example, this will probably make it easier to understand, Tracy eats a sandwich. So eats is the verb here, the predicate, in the simple present tense conjugation of to eat, okay? And it modifies a sandwich. So the sandwich here is the direct object, the thing that Tracy is eating. So it is the specific object that the action is being taken upon. An intransitive verb, on the other hand, is a verb that generally does not allow a direct object. So example here, Nancy was sleeping. So was sleeping, the past continuous tense of to sleep, cannot take a direct object. Now, we can talk about when she slept, where she slept, why she was sleeping, but the verb itself cannot modify a direct object, like to eat did. She was eating a sandwich. Okay? So examples of intransitive verbs are to sit, to go, to arrive, to die. And now you may notice that pretty much most of these examples refer to a change of location, of movement, change of a condition, which to die most certainly is. Okay? So that's how we can identify them. Now, I've mentioned the two terms infinitive and conjugation. So let's define those. So the infinitive is the base form of a verb. So in this example before, to play, to eat, to go, to sleep, to study. Okay? So the word to in front of it indicates that it's the infinitive. Now, the conjugation, and let me give you a simplified definition here, because if we took into consideration everything that determined the conjugations, would be a rather long and overwhelming sentence, it is basically adjusting that base form, the infinitive of a verb, from its principal parts by inflection based on a person. So I is first person, you second person, he, she, it, or they third person. This can be singular or plural. I is first person singular, we is first person plural. The gender, is it he, she, or it? The tense, is it simple past tense? Is it future tense? Is it present tense? And possession all determine how a verb form has to change based on those circumstances. So the examples here, I am playing, she played, we were playing, he had played, are all different variations of the verb to play, depending on which tense and the person and the number this is based on. So we've already referred to direct object. So again, the direct object, and again this has to be of a transitive verb, is the person or the thing that is being acted upon. So in this example here, Mary drank water. So water is the direct object because it is the thing in the sentence being acted upon. Okay? So we could ask about the direct object by using the interrogatives what or whom. What did Mary drink? Whom did Mary see? Those are how we ask about direct objects. Now, the indirect object, generally a noun or a pronoun or a noun phrase, occurs in addition to a direct object and indicates the person who or the thing that is being given a direct object. So again, an example is probably the most helpful thing. We have two examples here. The first one reads, Jim gave his wife flowers. The second one, Jim gave flowers to his wife. So in both sentences, his wife is the indirect object. So Jim's the subject, he's the agent of the action here. The predicate, the verb, is gave, the past tense of to give. Okay. So Jim is giving something, in this case, the flowers, which are our direct object. And now we also inform the reader whom he is giving these flowers to. And that's his wife. So that's why his wife is the indirect object, the recipient of the direct object of the flowers here. Okay? So here we could ask about that with the interrogatives to whom or to what. So in this case, to whom did Jim give the flowers? The answer is Jim gave the flowers to his wife, or Jim gave his wife the flowers. A complement is a word, phrase, or clause that is necessary to complete the meaning of a given expression, which is kind of a general definition. More often than not, we see the complement as a subject complement. This is something that we'll come across in our writing all the time. So a subject complement is necessary to define the subject. So in this example, Emma is a student. So a student is the subject complement because it's what defines Emma. And the verb is, the conjugation of the verb to be, is always an indication that it's a subject complement, because whenever I say this is that, that has to be the subject complement because it refers back directly. It defines the subject. We also sometimes call it a predicate nominative because it is based on the predicate is, or sometimes to become. He became a teacher. Again, it's teacher defines what he was, so therefore it's the subject complement. But we call it predicate nominative because the subject complement is also in the nominative case. This is something we don't need to worry too much about in English. The genitive case is the only one that has an ending where things change. For the most part, nouns at least don't really change depending if they're in the nominative case or other cases. All right, modifiers or qualifiers. In this case, that is a word that adjusts the meaning of a statement, either in terms of degree or intensity or frequency. So examples here are, only she understands me. So we could just say, she understands me, which would be fine. However, that's not really all we mean. We're also trying to say that no one else does. So therefore, we're now putting the modifier only in front of the word she to indicate clearly that there's no one else who understands us, only she does. All right, second example. We waited for almost an hour. Okay, so almost here is the modifier. Please note that it has to be in front of an hour. So the meaning of the sentence is, we were somewhere, we were waiting for someone, we waited, 54 minutes and then finally had it and went home. But it's the fact that we waited not quite an hour. Okay, so we don't want to put the almost in front of the verb waited because it doesn't modify the verb. We didn't almost wait. We did wait. We just waited almost an hour. So always make sure when you revise your work that you go back and look at the modifiers to make certain that they are in the right place and that they're truly modifying what you're trying to emphasize here. All right, next one. He was very generous. So again, here it's the degree of intensity. We could just say he was generous, but if he was sort of generous in a very outstanding way, then the word very sort of emphasizes that intensity. The swiftly flowing currents carried us down the river. So again, we're sort of defining that the currents were very fast flowing. All right, let's look at adverbials. So an adverbial can be an individual word. It could be an adverbial phrase or an adverbial clause that can modify a verb, an adjective, or a sentence. So this can appear anywhere in a sentence. Okay? And we'll look at different examples of where in a sentence it could be. We ask about adverbials with the question words when, where, and how. Okay? So usually things like time, place, and a manner in which something happens. So first example, yesterday we went hiking. So sentence initial here means that this adverbial, this time element is at the beginning of the sentence to indicate immediately what happened. We went hiking yesterday, so that will be the alternative. So instead of putting the adverbial, the time element at the beginning of the sentence, we're now putting it at the end of the sentence. I would say that the difference between those two may be the emphasis. Yesterday we went hiking, so there may be more of an emphasis on this is what we did yesterday. Okay? Whereas we went hiking yesterday is not so much about yesterday, but it's like, okay, this is what we did yesterday. Okay, so it's more about the action of what we did. I always hike in the autumn. So here preverbal means it's in front of the verb. Whereas in the next one, I ran quickly up a hill, is postverbal, it's after the verb. Okay? So always in the third sentence here indicates that this is when we always do it as opposed to other times of the year. In the fourth one, I ran quickly up the hill. It's sort of like, how did I run up the hill? I did it quickly. Okay? I have never gone hiking in the summer. Okay, so here it's within the verb group, indicating that I may have gone hiking in the spring, maybe in the winter. I always go in the autumn, but never in the summer. We will talk in one of the later grammar videos about pronouns and their antecedents and ambiguous pronouns. So it's important to understand what pronouns are. So pronouns, which is sort of Latin for in lieu of a name, pronoun, is a word that substitutes a noun or a noun phrase. So it can refer to a noun that has already been established or to one that doesn't need to be named specifically. For example, the pronoun I should always be clear. Okay? Whereas if we look at the pronoun he or she or they, we kind of need to establish first who he or she or is or they are before it can be 100% clear to a reader, because that's where ambiguity in pronouns sometimes comes from. So in this example, we are establishing first who this refers to. It's the antecedent. My grandfather is generous. He, my grandfather, gave me a car for my graduation. So here we don't need to repeat the word my grandfather because we've already established it. Now here we can just use the pronoun and we're fine. So let's look at a list of pronouns. So subject pronoun is, as I mentioned earlier, in the nominative case. So first person singular is I. Second person singular, you, is when we talk to one person. Third person singular, we have she, he, and it. So we're talking in the third person about a female, about a male, about an inanimate object. Okay. In the plural forms, we, so it's myself and at least one other person. Second person plural, you and another person at least that I'm talking to. Or third person plural, we're talking about at least two people or more. Okay. This is the form we use when it's the subject or the subject complement. Now, the object pronoun will remain the same whether it's a direct or indirect object. That's where English is much easier than a lot of other languages where one is in the dative case, one is in the accusative case. Sometimes it depends what kind of prepositions we're using in a sentence to determine that. It gets really complicated. That's where English grammar, for the most part, is really easy because we don't have to worry about any of these declensions. So me, us, you, her. So I would say I see her. So that I would be the subject, see would be the verb, the predicate, her, the female person I'm seeing. Here is the direct object in this object pronoun. Okay? Or she, the reverse, she sees me. So now she is the subject, I'm the direct object. Okay. The possessive adjective, this is my car, this is our house, this is her dog, okay? And related to that possessive pronoun is if we did not repeat that noun. So if I ask, is this your dog? You could just say, yes, he is mine. Okay, so you don't have to repeat. You could say he is my dog, but if I've already asked you, is he your dog, then you can just answer with, yes, he is mine. The reflexive pronouns are used usually in situations like if I want to emphasize the fact that I did something without anyone else's help, I can say I did this myself or we did it ourselves. But that's primarily how it should be used. All right, so moving on to a quick review of tenses. All right, so on the left, in the left-hand column, we have the terms for each tense and how it's formed. The center column kind of tells us in which situations, under what circumstances this should be used, and then in the right-hand column we have an example of it. All right, let's look at some of these components in a sentence context. First sentence: yesterday Jack's wife brought us a peach cobbler. So yesterday is an adverbial. When is how we ask about that. Jack's wife is the subject. Who brought us the peach cobbler? What did Jack's wife do? She brought, that's the predicate, the verb, a peach cobbler. What did she bring? What is the direct object she brought us? Okay. And to whom did Jack's wife bring a peach cobbler? She brought it to us. So therefore we are the indirect object. Second sentence. She is always generous. So she is the subject. She's the agent of the action here. Is the predicate, the verb. Okay. Generous, which is an adjective describing something, but in this case we know it's the subject complement because the verb to be, in this case, is being the conjugation, always gives it away that this defines that. Okay? And we could have just said she is generous, but we're modifying it with an adverbial to sort of increase the intensity of that by saying she is always generous. Okay. Final one, my mother never bakes anything for our neighbors. So here, in this case, my mother is the subject. Bakes is the predicate, the verb. Okay. The direct object is anything. Okay. Never means that she doesn't ever do it. This could have been seldom, rarely, hardly ever. Okay, so that's what the adverbial modifies here, how often she does it. In this case, she doesn't ever do it. Therefore, we say never. Our neighbors are the people that she doesn't bake for. So they are the recipients, or in this case, the non-recipients of our mother's baking. So they're the indirect object. And since the indirect object follows the direct object, we need the preposition for to clarify that. So on the following pages, you'll find a brief quiz to test your knowledge of what we've covered so far. If necessary, you can pause the video on each exercise slide. In fact, you probably want to, because I'll ask you 2 or 3 questions that are related to that sentence, so you may want to pause it so you don't need to worry and rush through it. Pause it, think about it, and then move on to the answer slide to confirm your answers. So let's get started. First exercise. So what is the subject in the sentence below? Is it a noun or is it a pronoun? The sentence is, she introduced him to me. The subject of the sentence is she. Okay. So in this case, she is a pronoun because it substitutes the subject's actual name. So we hopefully will know from context from a previous sentence who she is. It could have been Mary, Betty, whatever her name is, but hopefully we'll know from a previous sentence or some context who that is, so that she does not become an ambiguous pronoun. Second exercise. What is the predicate in the sentence below? Also, what tense is it in? And what is the direct object of the sentence? The sentence is, she introduced her new boyfriend to her parents. All right, the predicate or the verb in the sentence is introduced. It's in the simple past tense form of to introduce, in the third person singular, she. Okay. The direct object is her new boyfriend. It's the person she's introducing to her parents, who are the indirect object. Third exercise. What is the subject complement in the sentence below? What is the subject it refers to? And what is the adverbial? So the sentence is, Bob has always been my hero. My hero is the subject complement. It defines the subject, which in this case is Bob. Okay? And the adverbial is always. All right, fourth exercise. What is the modifier in the sentence below, and what is the adverbial? The sentence is, in the pouring rain, Susie waited for almost an hour for Steve. The answer for exercise 4, almost, is the modifier. So remember that it has to directly precede the information it modifies, which is an hour. Okay, so again, Susie might have waited 54 minutes, so not quite an hour, so therefore almost an hour. Now this sentence contains actually 2 adverbials. One is in the pouring rain and for an hour. All right, for exercise 5, you will definitely want to pause the video for just a moment. Here, I would like you to identify the 5 components of the sentence below. The sentence is, this morning, Paula paid her husband a compliment. Final answer. So, this morning is the adverbial. When did this happen? Okay, when did Paula pay her husband a compliment? Paula is the subject, so who paid her husband a compliment? Paid is the predicate. Her husband is the indirect object. He is the person that she paid the compliment to. And compliment is the direct object because that's the thing Paula gave her husband. All right, so again, there will be one more preliminary video to familiarize you with some of the basic terms. I've listed here some additional grammar resources. The first one is from the Writing Center at Towson University. That's a really great website that a lot of students, not just at Towson University, but in other places, find very helpful. The second one is also extremely well done. It's the Writing Center website for Purdue University. Okay, so you might want to check that out. And the third one, also very impressive, is the Writing Center website for grammar at Walden University. So hopefully you will have found this helpful. The second preliminary video will be about conjunctions, so you may want to take a quick look at that one as well before you move on to the more specific, detailed areas of grammar that I'll be discussing in the future series of grammar video instructions.